Hello YouTube, my name is Isabella and welcome back to my channel Stubbornly Bookish. Today I'm going to be doing a spoiler-free review for Children of Blood and Bone by Tomi Adeyemi. I'm finally catching up on my reviews. I actually read this in late March, but I've been meaning to talk about it for so long, but unfortunately, because I read it a few months ago, my memory is a little bit fuzzy and I can't do the spoilery gushing video that I wanted to. So I have resolved to do at least a spoiler-free review and talk about my general thoughts on this book and why I think you should pick it up. I would say that this is probably the most anticipated YA fantasy book of the entire year. Tomi Adeyemi not only sold the book rights, I think the trilogy for a 7-figure deal, but also already has the movie rights sold, and I'm excited to see where the series goes, and I'm so excited to see this on screen. If you didn't already know, Children of Blood and Bone is an Ownvoices West African-inspired young adult fantasy novel. It's essentially being pitched as Black Panther meets Avatar, and in this world, 15 years before a novel begins, the king actually finds a way to rip magic away from the magic users. In doing this, he manages to shift the tide of power in his favor, and he essentially commits genocide against the entire race of magic users. Now, at the beginning of our novel, our main characters are thrown together in a last-ditch effort to bring magic back and to rebalance the scales of power. Now, I'm not an Ownvoices reviewer, clearly, so I will do my best to link as many Ownvoices reviews as I can find, and if you've written or filmed an Ownvoices review, let me know and I will leave that link below as well. The setting was incredibly refreshing. It's really nice to see a YA fantasy so celebrated that's not based on like UK medieval sort of royalty. I loved what we saw of the magic system. It's quite elemental, but it's also really tied into their religion, and it was such an interesting balance. And normally with fantasies, you've got religion and magic separate, and I really liked how she intertwined that with their faith being one of their biggest sources of power. Tomi Adeyemi really kind of just throws you into this book, and you're left sort of playing catch up. You don't really get a good idea of how the magic really works in this novel, which is a bit of a shame. However, I do understand why it's not so developed, and that's because magic is ripped away from its people. For most of their lives, their magic was gone, and so not knowing the ins and outs of how their magic worked, I do understand that. However, what we did get to see from the magic and the world itself, I adored, and I ate up every little bit of information we got from it, so I'm incredibly excited to see more and just have it more developed in the later books. Now, the characters were really interesting because I loved our two main female characters, but our two male characters I found to be a little bit lacking. Oh, before I start talking more in depth about the characters, I'm going to apologize for my pronunciation. I tried looking up pronunciation guides, but I couldn't find them anywhere, so I'm probably going to butcher this. But Zelly, our first character that we were introduced to, I adored her because she's this combination of strength but also fear and just doesn't know if she's good enough. And to see that in a main character and to see that struggle, I thought it was incredibly relatable and also very admirable, because she's not some kick-ass heroine who just knocks down everything and is totally fine all the time. She really struggles with her value and her worth and doubts herself. And my favorite character was Amari. She's a princess and she's lived a life of privilege, miserable privilege, but still privilege, and her growth and arc in the story is fantastic. She really learns and sees how others are living outside of her very narrow scope and world. Her committing to justice and wanting to right her father's wrongs is fantastic, and I just love these two women to pieces. The prince, Amari's brother, he just was so wishy-washy to me. He had incredibly strong views going into it, and then he immediately flips 180 and he's always back and forth, and that sort of indecision I just really didn't mesh with. Assume that he's probably going to grow and be redeemed in the later books, but I'm really not a fan of his character at all. All of Adeyemi's characters were very fleshed out and had quite unique, distinct voices and perspectives. That is one of my favorite things of this, is that each one of our characters had a different perspective, and even if they agreed on the bigger picture, they kind of disagreed on how to get it done, and it brought an incredible amount of nuance to this story, and it created such an interesting element and addition to the story, and I really loved it for that. The plot was super engaging and really action-packed and made this over 500-page book just fly. It was really a hero's quest type of story, and I love and eat up any sort of time that there's a hero that has to go on a quest, however unwilling they may be. I found the twists and turns to be fun and sometimes predictable, sometimes unexpected, but enjoyable nonetheless. But with the pacing of the book, I didn't think that it was too quick-paced. There are moments of downtime and rest, and gives you time to breathe, the characters time to breathe, and a time for like introspection, which the pacing I think was phenomenal, and especially for a debut book, fantastic. However, I just could not get on board with the romances. The main romance that's featured is crazy insta-lovey, and it's so backwards to me that these two characters could have any sort of love and connection so quickly, especially knowing their backgrounds. I just thought it was stupid. I understand why the choice was made in terms of the plot and later on in the story, but I think that there could have been another way to do it because it just wasn't believable, and it really, really took me out of the story. I found the plot could be a little convenient at times, and that's definitely the pitfall of a debut author. There was just a couple times where things just happened and it was a little bit iffy and not so believable. And also I found the ending of this book to be incredibly messy. I know that we're not supposed to have all the answers and that there is supposed to be a cliffhanger, but everything happened so quickly at the end that I was just left really confused. I found Tomi Adeyemi's writing to be incredibly promising, and not to say that the writing in here was bad, but it was just so high quality already that I just can't wait to see how her writing improves in later books. Her descriptions of the various settings were incredibly lush and vivid, and I typically have a little bit of a difficult time picturing fantasy worlds, but this one I could see so very clearly. In terms of when she was describing action, I thought for the most part it was quite clear. Aside with all my little picky complaints, I really think that this is a book so worth reading. It combines fantasy and activism to really be a kick-ass, fun, enjoyable story, and I think Tomi Adeyemi has a crazy bright future ahead of her. As long as you don't go into this book with crazy high expectations because of the hype, I think you'll have a great time with this book, and I ended up giving it 4.5 of 5 stars. So that is it for my review today. I would love to know if you've read the book. Please, I would love to discuss this in the comments, and maybe you could help clarify what happened in the ending because I was left incredibly confused. As always, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you again very soon. Bye!